Leave it to Ryan Wilson to compare the 2025 NFL draft to the one back in 2015. That's what he's doing with two quarterbacks at the top, with Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders in his latest top 10. R-Dub saying shades of Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota a decade ago in the two-man race for QB1. Back here on the show with Chris Hassel, I'm Tommy Tran. We've got not one but two NFL draft analysts, Mike Renner joining us, and of course the aforementioned Ryan Wilson. So Ryan, take me through the thought process of not only the scenario we have upcoming in the draft, but why it mirrors and gives you thoughts of 2015.
Is that Tommy Tran? Good to see you, man. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's
I love
good
it.
to be back.
So here's the thing. Just so we're not confused by Tommy's words a moment ago, I'm not comparing Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders to Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota as prospects. But what happened in 2015, as Tommy noted, those two guys went number 1 and number 2, and that was it. The next quarterback wasn't until the 3rd round. And this year, it could be a very similar situation. I think at the top, we're going to have Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders in some order, potentially at 1 and 2. And then the next quarterback very well may not get drafted until the 3rd round. In fact, after last weekend, I am still unsettled on my QB3. But as we sit here with this mock draft, guys, I have the Raiders at the top. Shedeur feels like a popular choice to Las Vegas for a number of reasons. I think Cam Ward is slightly better, and I've laid those reasons out numerous times. A little bigger, a little faster, a little bigger arm, a little more athletic. But Shedeur's had a fantastic season as well, so you can swap those guys as you like. But the Giants cannot come out of this draft without a quarterback, and they are well on their way to getting either the number 1 or number 2 pick if you take a peek at their schedule and their injury concerns. So I think that's how this shakes out. And then the question becomes, who is going to be QB3 and when is QB3 going to go off the board? Is it going to be a Spencer Rattler situation round 5, or can you sneak one of those guys into the 3rd round, Mike?
Yeah, I think it could also be like the 2016 draft where we saw number 1, number 2 be Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, because I think Shedeur Sanders could be the number 1 overall pick just because he's played like it. Jared Goff went number 1 not because he had the best tools, not because he had the biggest arm or anything of that sort. He just played darn good football his final year at Cal. And then Carson Wentz was kind of the wild card like Cam Ward is, where it's, man, this guy has all the ability in the world, but can we get him to play like an NFL quarterback with NFL sort of footwork and technique? That's the biggest thing between those two. So I do think it really is in the eye of the beholder how you see those two. But then I see a third, the guy that could sneak in there, and Drew Aller. If he really lights it up in the playoff, he could be that third guy that sneaks into that 1st round, if there is going to be one, because the need is obviously going to be there for a lot of teams.
Yeah, Ryan, what do you think of Aller? Have you had him in any of your 1st-round mocks lately?
No, but to Mike's point, after watching last weekend's game, I was reconfirmed to me that Carson Beck probably isn't a 1st rounder. Now he's hurt. Quinn Ewers makes me angry like a dad gets angry at his son when he strikes out and he's the best player on the team. And then Drew Aller played extremely well, especially that first half. And I was thinking, and I was talking to our buddy Rick Spielman about, hey, you know what? He might be QB3 as well. So I get where Mike's going. I'm not quite yet ready to put him in round 1, but he could have a couple more football games in his future. And if he balls out, what's to stop that from happening?
Well, it's going to be a good year to not need a franchise quarterback in the draft because of that, because there might only be 2, maybe 3 guys in the 1st round. And the New England Patriots are one of those teams. They feel good about Drake May. And Ryan has the Patriots sitting there at 3, taking the likely Heisman Trophy winner in Travis Hunter. And, Mike, you've told us that this is a perfect fit for Hunter. Why is that?
It's because, one, they need a number 1 wide receiver. And to me, Travis Hunter, if you're just evaluating him as a wide receiver, I think he might be the best wide receiver in this draft class, even better than the guy out in Arizona and Tyrell McMillan, who's going to go not too far behind him come draft day. But then, 2, because they could also use like a slot cornerback on that defense. Like, the need is at both positions for this team. And so you could slot him as your number 1 wide receiver, put him in there in the slot on 3rd downs, crucial situations, because we know his conditioning is to the point where he can get it done. At that point, you get 2 players for the price of 1. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to the New England Patriots then.
So we're going to continue the conversation here. And again, things continue to be fluid. But if we go to number 7 with the Jets taking a cornerback and Will Johnson out of Michigan, R-Dub, take me through the thought process there.
Well, look, man, this is not a bad consolation prize if you land Will Johnson. He's been banged up the last half of the season or so with a toe injury, but when he is healthy, he is arguably the best cornerback in this draft class. I think Mike and I both had him CB1 over the summer and overall prospect number 1 as well. That's how good he is. A cornerback has never gone 1st overall. That tells you where he ranked out last fall. But in terms of the New York Jets, they're going to have some guys hit free agency, 4 or 5 defensive backs, so they'll have a need there. Sauce Gardner hasn't been quite the same. You see this pick 6 here. here early in the season that shows what he can do. But the other concern is this: when you're the Jets and you're where you are picking 7th, you're out of the QB race. They need a QB. They could use a wide receiver here. Garrett Wilson makes that clear just about every week. But they have needs at defensive line as well. Mason Graham's off the board at this point in this mock draft. So it's Will Johnson. And again, there are worse space than drafting Will Johnson because your other guys aren't there. But this team has a ton of needs. And one of the upsides to being terrible is when you are that bad, you can take virtually anybody and make your roster better. And Will Johnson certainly does that.
Johnson was my #1 player heading into this year's fall. Now he got banged up. The performance on tape didn't fall him down draft boards any, but getting hurt, obviously, always going to be a little bit of a red flag in your profile. But for the New York Jets, if you lose DJ Reed in free agency, you have Sauce Gardner on one side. He is a press corner. So whoever is your new DC, you're going to be running a lot of press. Will Johnson, probably the best press cornerback in this draft class. That's a great pairing to start whoever is going to be the next defense coordinator for the New York Jets.
Mentioned that he's been banged up. So has Kelvin Banks, the offensive tackle from Texas, who Ryan has going number 6 to the Titans. He did not play in the SEC championship game for Texas this past weekend. Only 2 offensive linemen in the top half of this first round. What do you think of Banks being the first one off the board?
I don't disagree that he should be the first offensive lineman off the board. I think from an athletic standpoint, he is the most impressive athlete in this offensive line class. You see it out in space, you see it on the move, and that offensive tackle nowadays, that's a prerequisite. You're facing like these 235-pounders that run 4.4s. You better be able to get off the football. So Kelvin Banks can. My problem here is with the fit with the Tennessee Titans. This will be 3 straight drafts that they go offensive line. This is reminiscent of like the Detroit Lions when they kept going wide receiver. If you can't figure it out with the first 2, what makes you think you're going to figure it out with the third one? I do just think that drafting him to then flip him sides to either play right guard or right tackle for the Tennessee Titans, I'd rather go a little safer pick in the first round if I'm drafting number 6 overall.
Well, I mean, this Titans team is a mess. And look, you can play him left tackle and move J.C. over to the right side. J.C. Latham played right guard and right tackle at Alabama. He's done a really good job there. I don't know what the overall issue is. And I take your point. You don't want to keep drafting guys because you can't fix the problem. So I don't know if it's coaching or something else. Skoronski was really good the first half of his rookie season before an appendectomy sidelined him. Do you want a quarterback in Will Levis? He's been up or down. Brian Callahan has to figure all these things out. Will Levis isn't the quarterback that he drafted. He arrived there with Will Levis already atop the depth chart. So, look, man, there are a ton of things to figure out when you're picking 6 anyway. And if you're sticking with Will Levis and you don't want to take a wide receiver because maybe that's a little too rich, I think this is about the range that Kelvin Banks goes. But keep in mind, last year, 9 offensive linemen went in the first round, and Banks and the rest of this crew along the offensive line in this draft class would probably come in at 5th or 6th before you start hearing their names come off the board. Were they there a year ago? So this draft class ain't like last year's draft class. You got to see the gems and find the gems, and that'll be the task for all 32 teams.
All right, great stuff, guys. Don't go anywhere. Much more with Ryan Wilson's first-round mock. We're going to tackle 11 through 20 here, just coming up a little bit. And I can tell you, there it is, number 12, Boise State's superstar Ashton Jeanty going to the Cowboys. We'll be discussing that one in just a little bit.
Back on HQ Spotlight, we've got a running back resurgence in football. Not just the NFL, but in college football, too. This is Cam Scatterboo, man, just so fun to watch at Arizona State. Of course, Ashton Jeanty is likely going to be a first-round pick in this year's NFL draft. But what about Scatterboo, who rushed for over 170 yards in the Big 12 championship game and is going to be in the college football playoff just like Jeanty? Well, let's get Mike Renner and Ryan Wilson in here. Mike, I mean, look, this guy hasn't gotten a lot of draft love, but you watch him play and you can't help but love watching him. What do the NFL guys say about him at the next level?
Yeah, I really like his projection with the body type, with the athlete, with the way he breaks tackles. 3rd most broken tackles in all of college football this season, 89 of them. And you just see the running style very translatable to the NFL. He's not a guy who's looking to hit home runs, bounce it out. If the hole is between the guard and the center, he's going to hit that hole between the guard and the center at full speed. That's what you want when you're drafting a running back when projecting to the NFL. So all that put together, probably not going to go day 1. There may not be anyone besides Ashton Jeanty that goes day 1, but I think he's solidified himself as a day 2 pick. Would be very surprised if he is not at this point.
Yeah, that'll be interesting because sometimes these running backs fall. And just so you know, Hassel, Spielman and I were talking about Scadaboo last year with the first pick. A reader tipped us off to how good he was, and he was fun last year. He had 8 punts last year, so he's slacking this year. Hasn't punted yet, so he needs to pick up the pace here. But we saw what he did over the weekend, and Mike talked about how good he is, and he is. It feels like he personifies what college football is all about, and that sounds sort of hacky and cliche. But you watch him play, he's running over guys, he's dragging guys into the end zone, he's making guys miss in space when it doesn't seem like physics will dictate that he would make guys miss in space. I will be interested to see, because of his physical, I don't want to call them limitations, but he is not as twitched up as some of the other athletes we see the running back position come out into the NFL if he lasts until day 3. Now, in terms of his heart, he's a top 5 pick. I just want to see physically how it works itself out once we get to poking and prodding these kids and having them run 40 times. But there's no doubt he has been instrumental to ASU's success. And the only thing we're missing is Pete Prisco's big ASU hat to commemorate how good Scadaboo's been.
Yeah, we were just talking about how his swag behind him multiplied with that Big 12 championship, it seems like here. We're continuing Ryan Wilson's mock draft, which, by the way, you were very clear to point out that the Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota comparisons to Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders would not hit. It was more situational than anything. By the way, 2015 had Melvin Gordon, Todd Gurley top 15 in that draft. You have Ashton Jeanty at 12 go to the Cowboys, but boy, this year particularly, they could have used it back, Ryan, like a Jeanty.
Right. It feels like Jerry Jones is always a day late and a dollar short when it comes to re-signing players or re-signing his own players or making moves for players. And here we are. Rico Dowdle's going to be out of contract. Zeke Elliott will be out of contract. I think the Zeke Elliott situation is one that's probably that ship has sailed. We'll see what happens with Rico Dowdle. But they need desperately a running back to take some of the pressure off Dak Prescott when he's healthy and to keep CeeDee Lamb happy in terms of providing balance to that offense. The offensive line has had its struggles. They could go in any number of directions, even defense, given how porous that unit has been under Mike Zimmer. But this feels about the range that we start talking about Ashton Jeanty and all the special things he can do. We talked last week about, is he tall enough? Well, he's fast and twitchy enough to do what he needs to do as a running back, and there are plenty of other playmakers on that Dallas Cowboys offense to help him out. So I would not be surprised if this ends up being around the area that he goes, and the Cowboys could certainly use him in Dallas.
All right, let's get into a couple of guys that Mike Renner either likes or does not like. We're going to start with a like here as the Falcons pick at 15. And they're fresh off just giving up like a half 100 to the Vikings almost. 42 points. Sam Darnold throwing all over the field. So they need some help. Why do you like them getting Tennessee edge James Pierce here in the middle of the first round?
Their pass rush has just been putrid all season long. And now they pressured Sam Darnold a little bit in that game, but more often than not it's because they were blitzing, bringing Caden Ellis off in the second level. But James Pierce is the kind of athlete that everyone's looking for. He had a slow start to this season, but in his last 6 games, 31 pressures over that span. In his last 6 games, that's like heart of the SEC play, right? So he's going to get to prove it against Ohio State, maybe Oregon after that in the college football playoff. This guy is twitched up for days. He moves like a wide receiver at the defensive end position. That's how I want my defensive ends to move, especially with the way the schemes are going at the NFL level. Raheem Morris, get you a James Pierce, you'll be very happy.
All right, let's continue the like or dislike. Ryan does have the Niners taking Josh Simmons, the San Diego State transfer, Ohio State tackle. Is this the heir apparent to Trent Williams? What are we thinking here?
It could be, but I also think that with that injury, I am not drafting this guy in the first round. It was a gruesome knee patellar injury that I don't trust a guy at that size to be able to come back from right away to play tackle for me in the NFL. So it's a rich pick for a guy that you're really banking on him healing and playing down the road. Now, if he was fully healthy, even if he had played out the rest of the season at the level he had played early on, this would be still a little high for me. I saw him as like a back end of the first rounder with the way he had performed. So taking him, even with that injury, to me, just a little too much. I'd look elsewhere at the tackle position or just wait on it altogether if I'm the San Francisco 49ers.
There's nowhere else to look. It's the problem. By the way, Hassel and Tommy, I said a few weeks ago, I was lauding Mike because unlike years past when Brady and Pete would just crush me every week on this mock draft thing, the tide's turning. Mike's coming after him. I'm not crazy about it. So let him know what's up. But he's not wrong about Josh Simmons. I talked to Rick about this in particular because he has not played a lot of football, San Diego State transfer, and the injury in that Oregon game. And prior to that Oregon game, he hadn't faced a lot of competition. He was really good, and I think Mike's right, late first-round talent. But I wish he would have come back to school. Easy for me to say. He could have been in the OT1 conversation had he done that because he's athletic, He's strong. He does all the things you want. He just lacks reps. And this is a stretch, no doubt about it, Mike. And Trent Williams, the injury history and all that is a concern there. But you are taking a gamble. And perhaps you look elsewhere. And elsewhere in this draft class, guys, it's usually defensive line or edge rusher.
Jumping down into the 20s of Ryan Wilson's latest first-round mock, and we'll find the Chargers at 21, reuniting Jim Harbaugh with his former college tight end in Colston Loveland. I'm guessing that's part of why you really like this, Mike.
Yeah, I do, because of one, that, and two, the fact that they need any receiving weapon there in Los Angeles. We saw it last night. When Ladd McConkey was out, there was no one that was getting consistent separation and no one who's reliable. Guys like Quentin Johnson have been dropping balls left and right of late. Ladd McConkey is, but you don't want Ladd McConkey running those routes over the middle of the football field with his injury history, with his size. Colston Loveland could do that. You look at who he has to face in that division. Patrick Mahomes, what has he had over the course of his career to make him franchise quarterback? Travis Kelce, a guy who works those intermediate zones better than anyone else in the NFL. You see Colston Loveland do that consistently on tape at Michigan. Has accounted for over a third of Michigan's receiving yards this year, and he doesn't even turn 21 years old until April. So he was the second leading receiver on a national championship team at 19 years old. That's impressive stuff for a tight end.
So let's get to the last pick of the first round, the Detroit Lions, who are the betting favorites to win the Super Bowl, but we know they have been decimated by injuries on the defensive end. Jack Sawyer is Ryan's selection here, so is it the play or the fit, a combination of both?
It's the player. I just don't think Jack Sawyer is a first-rounder at this point in time. He's a senior, only 42 pressures on the season, and in a scheme that's fairly favorable to pass rushers historically. I don't see the athlete in a defensive line class, and specifically an edge class, that's chock full of first-round type of athletes. He is a good tier behind that. So a high floor player, I think he's a guy that you can plug and play at the NFL level, but I just don't see going to bat for him over some others in this edge class, especially when, again, I just think he's limited at the next level. They need to hit a home run along that defensive line if they're going to go that route.
Mike, I ain't even mad at you because I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what to do at 32. Maybe there's a team that wants to trade up for Drew Aller. I like him better than JT Tuimoloau a little bit, but I also like the fit. There's Ohio State connection with Chris Spielman as well. Opposite Aiden Hutchinson, where he won't be asked to do quite as much. But in terms of being a top flight, twitched up edge rusher, he's not the same conversations as the top 3 or 4 of these guys. I get it, and I understand that. It'll be interesting to see how the bottom half of this first round shakes out, guys, because there might be 19 or 20 first round grades by the time we're all said and done. On the other hand, you see guys like Braden Fisk, who went in round 2 and are first-round talent. So we'll figure it all out together. But right now, I can't even push back on Mike's objection to Sawyer at 32 because for the reasons he laid out there.
Fair enough, Ryan. Mike, certainly appreciate it. Check out the With the First Pick podcast with R-Dub and Rick Spielman. Mike, a regular contributor on this podcast as well. Scan the QR code and enjoy this podcast however you listen to your podcast.